I wasn't hunting for sin, I was looking for a parking spot. Autumn Drive in Naperville was jammed with Saturday tailgates and leaf piles, and I just wanted to drop off a toolbox at my son-in-law's place and get home before the Bears game. Then I saw it. My wife's silver Lexus idling at Ethan's curb, driver's mirror tilted the way she sets it, pumpkin-colored scarf looped over the passenger headrest like a little flag I was never meant to see. The porch flag snapped in the wind. The living room blinds glowed blue from a TV I'd mounted myself with studs I still remember by knuckle. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from, because what I'm about to tell you is the ugliest truth a family photo can hide. I killed my engine and let the truck settle. The air smelled like wet leaves and someone's charcoal grill. I kept my boots on the pavement because gravel talks, and I needed silence more than heroics. Through the front window, through the reflection of a framed wedding picture that still had my face in it, I saw two shadows move close, familiar. A hand on a back I knew. You don't need dialogue when the choreography tells the story. Didn't knock. I listened. A glass chimed soft against another, a low laugh I could have picked out of a crowd at O'Hare. In Ethan's kitchen, the one I'd remodeled after their wedding with cabinets paid from my overtime, someone set. A stemware base on quartz, like a bell being taught not to ring. I took proof, not revenge. Dashcam was still rolling. I clicked the SD into my shirt pocket. I snapped a single photo of the Lexus plate at his gate, with the time crowding the corner of the screen. In my pocket calendar, the paper one because paper doesn't forget, I wrote Oct 18, 3:47 p.m. Lexus at Ethan's. My hands didn't shake. Rage is a drunk driver. Proof keeps between the lines. I left before anyone could open a door and paste a smile over the truth. I drove to the gas station on Ogden Avenue, top-off I didn't need, and grabbed a black coffee and a Bic. The receipt printed out warm, $4.62, and I circled it so hard the paper thinned. I slipped it into my wallet behind the insurance card. Like it was the first nail in a frame I knew I'd have to build. At home, the house felt staged for a life I couldn't afford to live twice. The cinnamon candle was still burning in the kitchen, she forgets it all the time, and the clock above the sink ticked like a metronome for heartbeats I didn't feel. I set the gas receipt under a magnet shaped like a tomato and stared at it until the numbers meant more than numbers. The pension that paid for those cabinets, the HELOC Ethan once called smart leverage, the deed copy in my shed, all of it crowded into that ink circle and dared me to be sloppy. When Linda came in later, with the same scarf neatly folded, she kissed the air near my cheek and said I was helping Ethan with his garage shelving. I said good, because sometimes a man has to choose between being right now and being right later. After she went to bed, I sat at the dining table I'd refinished in '96, pressed my palms flat to keep them from planning a scene, and recorded a voice memo. October 18th. Proof first. No confrontation. The house breathed. The refrigerator kicked on. Somewhere, a neighbor's dog barked and gave up. I opened a new manila folder and wrote in block letters across the tab, Linda, Ethan, proof. Then I slid the 462 receipt inside like a seed, will break concrete. I didn't sleep angry. I slept like someone who left the stove on and refused to get out of bed to check it. Every time the house creaked, I thought it said her name. At 1:12 a.m., I turned on the bedside lamp and saw dust lift in the light like snow you can't shovel. I opened my wallet, took out the gas receipt and ran my thumb around the thin ink circle until it softened. That circle was a promise to myself. I would not become the man who shouts and loses the plot. Proof over panic, boundary over brawl. I whispered the words like a prayer and clicked the lamp off. Morning came grey and honest. Sunday in Naperville smells like coffee and distant church bells even if you don't go. I made eggs I didn't want and buttered toast I didn't taste. The kitchen felt like a set where someone else played me better. I washed my plate and listened to the ticking clock over the sink, the same second hand that's kept time through holidays and hurricanes of little arguments. I thought about how many of our cabinets, our trips, our gifts had been pieced together from my overtime. December furnace repairs, January snow shovels for the school district, the spring repaint of a gym that hadn't been painted in 20 years. Every receipt in my file cabinet was a stitch holding this house together. All that work, and I could still be made a fool in my own story. Linda came down in a robe at 9:08, hairpinned, skin clean of yesterday's perfume. "Morning," she said, as if sounds don't carry on Autumn Drive. "Morning," I said, because if there's a bridge to cross, I don't torch it from my side. She slipped a hand on my shoulder, the way you placate a guard dog, and asked if I'd seen the new HOA email about Halloween decorations. I said yes, and it took all my discipline. Not to add, and the one about street cameras. She poured coffee into the mug I bought her in Door County, a blue one with a little sailboat, and the boat sailed away on steam like it always does. "Ethan still needs help with those shelves," she said, casual as a weather report. I told him I'd check your schedule. "Tell him I'm tied up this week," I said, "winterizing the shed." A truth you can stand up in. She went upstairs. The cypress steps didn't squeak because I'd fixed that last spring. I sat at the dining table I refinished in '96. That table knows my hands better than some people do. I took out my pocket calendar and wrote 3 lines where the month of October offered me a little white space. Collect, confirm, consult. Not a revenge plan, an honesty plan. I slid the calendar into the new manila folder, then wrote in block. Letters on the first page of a composition notebook. If you think you're crazy, check the paper. The quiet got bigger around me in a way that felt less like loneliness and more like room to maneuver. At 10:32, I opened the junk drawer, took out the old digital recorder I'd used when I rebuilt the porch. Notes about measurements, supplies, the kind of things you forget until a joist laughs at you, and pressed record. October 19th, I said. House intact, evidence folder started, no confrontation. Next steps, do nothing loud. Observe patterns. If patterns exist, verify with proper channels. My voice sounded older than my hands feel. I stopped, recording, and stared at the red dot on the device like it might blink back. Around noon, I went out to the shed. The air had that metal smell, tools, oil, November waiting by the door. I unlocked the grey file cabinet and slid out a labelled folder. House, deed and HELOC. I didn't open it. I just held the weight for a minute. The heft of a life you pay for month by month and protect with boring choices. On the workbench sat the old doorbell I'd been meaning to replace. It's a tiny thing, the doorbell, but it's how a house announces itself to the world. I set it in the corner like it could listen. Back inside, I tried the Bears game with the sound off. The players moved like fish in a tank, all struggle, no noise. I brewed another pot of coffee I didn't need and leaned on the counter where the quartz seam runs like a vein, only I know is there. I thought about Nora, my daughter, Ethan's wife, and her face when she focuses on a problem. Forehead creased the way it was when she learned to ride a bike. I drafted 3 different texts to her and deleted them each. Hey kiddo, how are you two doing? Delete. Any chance you and Maya want to come over for dinner? Delete. If you ever need a receipt to prove your father isn't crazy, I have one. Delete. 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 At 4:15, Linda asked if I wanted to drive over to Trader Joe's for pecans and heavy cream. She hates driving Sundays. The lots are chaos. You go ahead, I said. I want to sweep leaves before the frost. We both knew we were lying, but lies have a different temperature when they sit in daylight. She took her keys and purse and paused by the coat hooks. The pumpkin scarf hung there like a loud thought. You okay? She asked. I'm winterizing, I said. Everything. She looked at me 1 second too long, then left. I swept the same leafless patch of patio 3 times, not because it needed it, but because I did. By 5:30, the light had gone blue, the kind of blue that tells you to get your tools put away. I stacked the broom, the dustpan, the bag of lawn waste in soldier straight lines, because some order you can still impose. I went back in, wrote the date at the top of another notebook page, and copied my 3 rules with a better pen. Collect, confirm, consult. The pen didn't skid this time. Before bed, I stood in the doorway and watched Linda read on her side of the bed, a book club paperback folded in half like it owed her something. She glanced up and smiled without showing teeth. "You're quiet," she said. "I'm thinking about winterizing," I said again, and shut the light. In the dark, I touched the recorder on my nightstand like a talisman and told myself a last small truth. I can hold this pain steady until it pays rent. Sunday night passed without dreams, just that hum of the refrigerator that sounds like an old man thinking. By Monday, the air had turned crisp, gold leaves crusting the gutters. I sat at the table with my coffee and unfolded the phone bill. It wasn't new, just something I hadn't really read before. Under outgoing calls, 3 numbers ended. In 7734, each logged at 11:53 p.m. on weeknights, when Linda was supposedly asleep beside me. I highlighted them, the yellow ink shaking slightly, then slid the pages into the manila folder marked Linda, Ethan, Proof. Every proof deserved a sleeve. Every lie deserved a label. Around 9 a.m. I texted Nora, "Morning, kiddo. You two doing all right?" She sent back a smiley and a picture of a casserole dish, my own dish, sitting on Ethan's granite counter. "Mom brought this over the other day," her message read. "Said it's your chili recipe." I stared at the photo longer than I should have, at the red edges of sauce burned into the rim. That dish hadn't left my house in years. No accusations yet, not until I had more than shadows and scarf fabric. At noon, I walked to Earl's Locksmiths on Jefferson. The bell over the door jingled the way honesty does before it dies. "You still doing residential rekeys?" I asked. Earl squinted at me through readers. "Before winter hits? Sure. 189 per cylinder." I nodded. "Let's pencil it in for early November." He scribbled it on a carbon pad and tore off the white copy. The smell of metal polish followed me. Out the door, frost preserves footprints, I thought. And I'd need both. That afternoon I phoned the HOA office. "This is Martin Hale, Autumn Drive," I said. "You folks installed new street cameras last week, right?" "Yes, sir," said a woman named Ginny. "Footage is released only with an attorney's request." That word, proper, settled in my chest like an anchor. I thanked her, hung up, and opened my laptop to search. Naperville family law attorney, discreet. That's how I found Priya Desai. Her office sat above a dentist's on Washington Street. Tuesday, October 21st, 9 a.m. I walked in with a folder. Thinner than I wanted and a face older than I remembered. "You're early," she said with a small smile. "That's good. The guilty arrive late." I laid out the proofs, the phone bill, the gas receipt, the highlighted times. She examined each with that practiced stillness lawyers wear like perfume. "Patterns prove intent," she said finally. "If you were my client, I'd request the HOA footage, hire a licensed investigator, and preserve all financial accounts." Quietly, she wrote $3,000 retainer on a yellow pad, circled it and slid it across the desk. The ink smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. "I don't want to ruin anyone," I said. "Just protect what's mine." "That's what lawful ruin looks like," she said. I left her office lighter, carrying a signed receipt and the calm of someone with a map. Outside, traffic glittered in the fall sun, all those windshields catching light and moving forward. I took it as an omen. At home, Linda was rearranging the spice rack, humming. I watched her slip cinnamon next to cumin like nothing in the world was out of place. I smiled because anger needs silence to grow. "How was your morning?" she asked. "Productive," I said. Made a few calls, saw a lawyer about updating the will. Her hand froze on the jar. The will? Just being responsible, I said, pouring coffee slow so she wouldn't hear my pulse. That night, after she turned in, I opened my recorder again. October 21st, I whispered. Consultation complete. Retainer signed. Lawyer believes me. Next investigator. I clicked stop and wrote the words again in my notebook. Collect, confirm, consult. I underlined confirm until the ink bled through the paper. In the quiet, I realized I was building something. Not revenge yet, just scaffolding for the truth. And once it stood tall enough, the people who'd built their lies on me would finally see how small their house really. Caleb Ortiz didn't look like a private investigator. He looked like a man who'd learned to watch his coffee cool before drinking it. We met on October 23rd, 8:17 a.m., at the Dunkin' off Washington Street, the one that smells like burnt sugar and tired dreams. He wore a brown jacket that didn't squeak when he moved and carried a notebook so thin it could have been a grocery list. You want clean, he said, stirring his cup without sugar. You get boring. Boring wins. I don't need a movie, I said. I need proof that stands up when it's stapled. He grinned, tapped his pen against the table and wrote the plan. 1 week observation, November 3rd to 10th. No confrontations. No trespassing, just times, entrances and evidence. Before he left, he handed me a plain manila envelope. First invoice, pay half now, half after. And Mr. Hale, don't tip your hand. People get sloppy when they think they're clever. I slid the $750 retainer across the table and nodded. I've spent a lifetime fixing other people's mistakes. Time I start fixing mine. Back home, I went through motions so normal they hurt. Wiped the counters, refilled the sugar jar, changed a light bulb. At 9 p.m., I brought Linda her tea, 2 sugars, a splash of milk, and sat across from her while she scrolled her phone. Ethan called, she said, tone light as frosting. He's struggling with his startup again. I told him you might lend an ear. Always happy to help family, I said, smiling like it didn't cost me anything. But I noted the phrasing. Again, that meant repetition. That meant pattern. On October 24th, Priya's office sent the formal request to the HOA for footage from October 18th, between 3:30 and 4:30 p.m. It'll take them a week, she said. Meanwhile, keep your normal routine. Normal. So, I bought lilies from the florist on Ogden, $28.70, card unsigned, and left the receipt in my folder. Linda put them in a glass vase by the kitchen window and called them peace offerings from the universe. I said nothing. Guilt often hides in gestures that look like gratitude. November 3rd arrived cold, the kind of cold that makes sound travel sharper. Caleb texted, starting surveillance, Autumn Drive. No movement yet. He parked in his grey sedan 2 houses down from Ethan's. The camera in his thermos could see the driveway and the porch steps. I didn't ask how he made it work. I just trusted. The hum of the plan unfolding. That same morning I balanced our joint checking account, $42,307.12. Every dollar had a job. I'd earned them 1 furnace repair, 1 overtime shift, 1 tax season at a time, and I wasn't about to see them siphoned through charm. On November 5th, I scheduled Earl to rekey the back shed in my office. Want the same key pattern? He asked. No, I said, different cuts. Every lock deserves a second chance. He chuckled, printed the invoice, and slid it across the counter. The smell of machine brass followed me home. By November 6th, the air had turned metallic, like coins and secrets. I stopped by my bank and asked for Connie, the supervisor who'd helped me refinance the mortgage 5 years back. Someone tried to pull a HELOC draw on your line last week, she said, squinting at her monitor. Did you authorize that? My stomach went cold. No, ma'am. She frowned, printed a confirmation letter, and stamped it with the raised watermark that feels like armor when you run your thumb over it. We'll flag the account, she said. No funds move without your signature. I thanked her and slipped the letter into my folder beside the florist receipt. That night, Linda made lasagna. She poured 2 glasses of wine and said, "I feel like you've been distant lately." "Winter's coming," I said, "just trying to keep the pipes from freezing." She smiled, a little puzzled, and toasted the air. "To us," she said. I clinked her glass lightly. "To documentation," I whispered into mine. Before bed, I opened my recorder. "November 6th, I said. "Locks changed. Bank secured. Investigator in position. No confrontation. My revenge wasn't going to be loud, it was going to be notarized." By November 7th, the leaves were gone, and the streets looked like bare truth. Nothing left to hide behind. Linda told me she had book club that evening at a friend's house in Aurora. I smiled, handed her her coat, and said, "Drive safe." My phone buzzed 15 minutes later. A quiet ping from Caleb. "Caleb, text. Silver Lexus, Autumn Drive. 7:54 p.m. Lights off. 2 hours." 2 hours. That's how long it takes to confirm a suspicion and kill a marriage. I didn't answer him. I just looked at her empty coffee mug in the sink, lipstick on the rim, cinnamon creamer still coating the bottom, and wrote in my notebook, "Friday, Lexus, Autumn Drive, Book Club. At 10:08 p.m. she came home humming, cheeks red from the kind of warmth the November air can't give." "Book club ran long," she said, hanging her coat. "You know how wine loosens tongues." "I do," I said, "and memory." She smiled at me, maybe trying to read how much I knew, but I'd stopped giving away subtitles to my emotions. The next morning, Nora showed up with our old casserole dish in her hands. "I think Mom left this at our place," she said. The glass still smelled faintly of chili, and something else. "Expensive cologne, not mine." "Appreciate it," I said. She looked down, hesitant. "Dad, is everything okay with Mom?" "She's been busy. Ethan, too." I swallowed the truth like bad medicine. "They're both adults," I said. "Sometimes adults confuse busy with fulfilled." Her brow tightened. "That's not an answer." "It's the best one I have right now," I said softly. "After she left, I washed that dish 3 times. It didn't matter. Some smells don't come out with soap." On November 10th, Priya emailed me the HOA footage. Subject line, Autumn Drive. 10:18, footage secured. My pulse tripped as I opened the link. The grainy clip showed the Lexus pulling up at 3:41 p.m. A woman stepped out, pumpkin scarf unmistakable, and Ethan opened the gate, grinning like a boy who'd never been caught. They moved close, mouths near, hands familiar. No audio, but silence sometimes tells you everything. I played it 3 times. On the 3rd, I noticed something small. Ethan's hand brushing her wrist, then her adjusting her scarf like a reflex. The intimacy wasn't improvised, it was rehearsed. I printed stills from the video, slid them into clear sleeves, labeled the folder tab HOA footage, Oct 18 in red ink, and placed it beside the phone bill highlights. Priya called. "You have your proof," she said. "Next step, secure finances, send a demand letter, or prepare for mediation. You'll choose your venue." "Venue," I repeated. "Where truth meets audience," she replied. "Courtroom, living room, family table. It's your stage, Mr. Hale." After we hung up, I circled Thanksgiving on the kitchen calendar. The one with turkeys and maple leaves dancing across the border. "Dinner here?" Linda had written in pink marker. I smiled faintly and wrote beneath it, "Yes, place cards on me." I went to Staples that afternoon and bought a pack of thick cardstock. At home, I wrote each name in careful cursive. Linda, Ethan, Nora, Maya, my granddaughter, and me. When I got to Ethan, I pressed a little harder, the pencil tip nearly breaking. That night, I sat at the table, sharpening my pencil again and again, until the shavings curled like ribbon. The sound calmed me. Planning has its own rhythm, like breathing through a storm. Linda walked by in her robe. "You're making name cards already?" she asked, amused. "Just like order," I said. "Still weeks away," she teased. "Preparation is my love language," I said without looking up. Behind every holiday miracle, there's a man who already knows the ending. When she went upstairs, I opened the binder. Receipts, footage, letters, invoices, all lined up in sequence. The truth was almost ready to speak for itself. I stared at the lilies on the counter, their petals already browning. Guilt flowers never last long. I closed the binder, turned off the kitchen light and whispered to the dark, "Almost there. Just a few more days, and the silence will start talking for me." The night outside was frozen still, the kind of cold that makes you hear your own heart beating, and mine was steady, deliberate, patient. The calm before proof turns into consequence. By November 15th, the plan had teeth. Priya mailed out the demand letter that morning, 3 printed pages sealed in a cream envelope, legal weight. It was addressed to Ethan Vargas and began with the kind of line that cracks like a whip. Cease and desist all contact with Mrs. Linda Hale outside the context of family events. It went on to mention impropriety, possible financial entanglements, and one very specific transfer, $2,800 from Linda's personal card to Ethan's consulting business on November 2nd. When Priya showed me the draft, she said, "This isn't about emotion anymore. It's about math. Math I could live with. Emotion was the currency of fools. With the letter sent, I did nothing. No arguments, no suspicion, no rearranging of schedules. I made breakfast every morning, scrambled eggs, toast, and silence. I left Linda's favorite mug by the coffee maker, the one that said, "Best grandma ever." I even asked about pie flavors for Thanksgiving. "Pecan," she said instantly, smiling too easily. "Everyone loves pecan." Funny thing about lies, they crave sweetness. On November 18th, Caleb texted, "Got something you'll want to see. Delivering in person soon." When he arrived that Thursday evening, he didn't come to the front door. He met me in the shed, where the smell of metal and oil kept secrets better than walls. He slid a brown envelope across the workbench. "From last night," he said. "Took some work, but it's clean." Inside were stills, crystal sharp despite the distance. Linda and Ethan in his den. Her glasses on the coffee table I'd sanded last spring. The reflection of her scarf shimmering faintly in a framed photo behind them. That scarf had followed me for weeks. Now it finally spoke. I stared at the photos until my hands steadied, then asked, "Audio?" "None," Caleb said. "Didn't need it. Expression says enough." He zipped up his jacket and added, "You're handling this like a pro, Mr. Hale. Most folks blow up before I even finish the job." "I've been fixing other people's messes my whole life," I said. "This one's just personal." He left and I sat in that shed for a long while. The cold bit through my jacket, but I didn't move. Proof has a way of warming you differently. It burns from the inside out. The next morning I printed one photo and sealed it in an envelope marked "Private," for Nora only. I texted her, "Can you meet me behind Mariano's this afternoon? Just need 10 minutes. We met in the truck, heater humming low, condensation fogging the windows. She looked nervous. "What's going on, Dad?" I handed her the envelope. She opened it, glanced once, then twice, then closed her eyes. "Oh my God." "I didn't want you to find out like this," I said quietly. Her breathing hitched. "Are you sure?" I waited until I was. We sat in silence for a while, the heater filling the space with a dull mechanical heartbeat. Then she asked, "What are you going to do?" "Nothing stupid," I said. "We'll be patient. We'll be precise." She nodded slowly, jaw trembling, then pulled out her phone and opened the voice memo app. "Let's record this," she said, "so there's a line we don't cross." Smart girl. I pressed record and spoke evenly. "This is Martin and Nora Hale. We acknowledge what we've seen, photographic and financial evidence of misconduct between Linda Hale and Ethan Vargas. We agree not to act in anger or violence. All responses will be lawful and documented," Nora added, her voice breaking only once. We'll handle this together. I stopped the recording. That's enough for now, I said. What happens next? She asked. We host Thanksgiving, I replied. We host the truth. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house barefoot, each board creaking like a confession. The lilies by the sink had wilted completely. I dropped them in the trash and washed the vase until the glass squeaked. Then I took out my pocket calendar and drew a star over November 27th. Thanksgiving. This wouldn't be a dinner anymore. It would be a reckoning wrapped in tablecloth and grace. When I finally lay down beside Linda, she murmured, half asleep, "Did you lock the shed?" "I did," I said, and I smiled in the dark, because for once she was the one who should have asked why. Thanksgiving came dressed in false comfort, linen tablecloth, cinnamon candles, the smell of sage and butter, hiding the frost creeping up from the yard. The house looked perfect, as if pretending hard enough could glue the cracks shut, but I'd spent a month learning how to stage something better than dinner. I'd built a courtroom in my dining room. At 3 p.m., Nora arrived first, pale but composed, holding a pumpkin pie that trembled slightly in her hands. "You sure about this?" she whispered. I nodded. "If we don't open the wound, it festers." She set the pie down and looked at me like she was seeing someone new, a version of her father she'd only suspected existed. Ethan arrived next, wearing that same salesman's smile, a navy sweater over a collared shirt, sleeves rolled to show confidence. "Martin," he boomed, "smells amazing in here." "It should," I said. "We've been marinating truth for weeks." He blinked, confused, and turned to kiss Nora on the cheek. She leaned away just slightly, enough for me to notice. Linda came last, arms full of grocery bags, though everything was already cooked. "You didn't have to," she started, but I cut her off gently. "I wanted it to be just right," I said. "A family dinner to remember." By 4:06 p.m., the table was set. The name cards I'd written sat crisp and clean. Ethan, Nora, Linda, Maya, Dad. I'd placed my seat directly opposite Ethan's, so we could see each other's eyes when truth started breathing. The first 20 minutes passed like a stage rehearsal. Small talk, compliments, lies wrapped in gravy. Ethan bragged about a new business lead. Linda laughed too loudly. Nora stayed quiet, pushing her food around her plate. When grace ended, I tapped my glass once. The sound was sharp enough to slice the air. Everyone looked up. "I'm thankful for proof," I said. The words hung there. Even the clock seemed to stop ticking. I reached down, lifted a slim black binder from the floor beside my chair, and set it on the table. Linda's smile froze halfway between amusement and fear. Ethan chuckled softly, thinking I was joking. "What's that, Dad?" Nora asked, though she already knew. I flipped open the first page. "The HOA still," I said, sliding it across the table. "October 18th, 3:41 p.m., silver Lexus, pumpkin scarf, Ethan at the gate." Ethan's mouth opened, then closed again. He glanced at Linda, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. Next, I laid down the phone bill highlights. 3 calls to Ethan's. Number at 11:53 p.m., the kind of hour you only reach for someone you shouldn't. "Could be work-related," Linda stammered. "Of course," I said calmly. "Which is why there's also this." I placed the florist receipt on top. Dated, October 21st for lilies. "Apology flowers have a smell too." Ethan shifted in his chair. "Martin, I think you're misreading." I didn't let him finish. I opened the next sleeve. A still from Caleb's footage, the one showing their reflections in Ethan's. And then, her glasses on the table, his hand on her wrist, Linda's fork slipped clinking against her plate. "This is cruel," she whispered. "This," I said evenly, "is documentation." Nora's breath hitched beside her daughter. She looked from me to Ethan, then back again, her jaw trembling. Priya had coached me for this moment. "Stay calm, use dates, no adjectives, don't debate." October 18th, discovery. November 2nd, financial transfer, $2,800 labeled as consulting. November 7th, late-night meeting. November 10th, HOA footage. November 15th, legal notice mailed. November 20th, final confirmation. I paused. Today, acknowledgement. Ethan stood up so fast, his chair scraped the floor. This is absurd. You can't just... Nora's voice cut through him like glass. Sit down, Ethan. He froze. That tone had authority he'd never heard before. Slowly, he lowered himself. Back into his chair, Linda looked around the table, eyes wild. You hired a private investigator on your own family? I protected my own family from theft, I said quietly. Of love, of trust, of money. Take your pick. I reached for the final document. Connie's bank letter confirming the blocked HELOC inquiry. I placed it gently on top of the pile. You weren't just cheating on vows, I said, eyes steady on Ethan. You were testing doors that didn't belong to you. No one spoke for a full minute. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the wall clock filled the room. Outside, frost clung to the window like an audience that refused to leave. Finally, I pushed my chair back. From this moment, I said, everything moves through attorneys. No screaming, no games, no second chances. There will be consequences you can't charm your way out of. Ethan's face drained of color. Linda tried to stand, but her knees buckled, and she gripped the edge of the table for balance. Nora rose slowly, walked around to my side, and rested her hand lightly on my shoulder. You don't need to say anything else, she said. We see it now. Maya, too young to understand, looked up from her coloring book and asked, Mommy, why's Grandma crying? No one answered. I closed the binder, its spine snapping, shut like a judge's gavel. Then I picked up my water glass, took a long drink and said softly, Dinner's over. Ethan pushed his plate away. You can't prove everything, he muttered, voice shaking. I don't have to, I replied. I only have to prove enough. Linda whispered my name, but it wasn't a plea. It was disbelief. The kind of disbelief that happens when the person you thought was harmless learns how to build a case. As I walked to the doorway, I looked back once more. The table was still set, the turkey untouched, the candles burning low. But the illusion was gone. All that remained was the truth, and it was colder than the frost waiting outside. When the front door closed behind me, I felt lighter than I had in years. Some people burn bridges. I filed them, time-stamped and notarized. The morning after Thanksgiving felt like waking up after surgery, everything numb, but the pain waiting just below the surface. The binder sat on the counter, its black cover reflecting the first grey light. Of dawn. I didn't touch it right away. You don't rush closure, you sign for it in ink. By 9 a.m., I was in Priya's office downtown. She looked up from her monitor as I walked in and said, You brought it? I set the binder on her desk. Every lie alphabetized. She flipped through the contents. Phone bill, receipts, photos, the bank letter. Good, she said. Let's start with asset protection. We filed for legal separation that morning, along with an emergency request to freeze joint accounts. Pending discovery, I added notarized copies of my pension paperwork and property deed to the file. The clerk stamped each document with a dull thud that sounded like punctuation. By noon, Priya was drafting a separate complaint against Ethan, misuse of familial funds and breach of fiduciary trust. It wasn't about humiliation anymore. It was about restitution, about every dollar that tried to sneak out the back door while I was making dinner. I called Connie at the bank to confirm the HELOC block was still active. You're all good, Mr. Hale, she said. We'll notify you if anyone even breathes near that account. Keep the file open, I said. Truth has a long tail. Meanwhile, Nora had her own work to do. She'd left Ethan that same night, packed 2 suitcases, and taken Maya to her sister's place in Aurora. When she called me that evening, her voice was steady. I spoke to a lawyer, Dad. He said Ethan's attempt to use your HELOC might count as financial misconduct. It does, I said, "and Priya's handling it." A pause. "You really did all of this quietly?" "That's the only way. Truth travels. It hates noise." By the following week, the first dominoes started to fall. Ethan's employer, an architectural consulting firm, received Priya's formal letter outlining conflict of interest concerns, complete with attached exhibits, no accusations, just dates and signatures, the kind of precision that corporations fear. Linda tried to control the story, of course. She called friends from church, saying I'd misunderstood, but stories without receipts collapse under their own weight. Priya had already mailed certified copies of the evidence to Linda's attorney. Dates don't lie. They just sit, there, patient and sharp. At home, I moved into my office. The master bedroom felt contaminated, so I let it sit cold. I rekeyed the shed again. Earl came by on December the 2nd and handed me the new keys, smiling. "You sure you don't want to keep one original for memory?" he asked. "I'm done collecting ghosts," I said. He chuckled and left the invoice on my workbench. I slid it behind the bank letter. Proof that the locks, like my life, had been changed properly. I spent those days labeling folders, cross-referencing statements, and writing a small note at the bottom of each. No confrontation, only confirmation. When Linda's attorney finally called, Priya took the lead. The conversation was clinical. Separation terms, pension access, division of property, no fireworks, just paperwork and deadlines. Every page felt like a step towards silence that wouldn't hurt. That weekend, Nora and Maya came over. We colored paper turkeys on the same table where the truth had detonated. Maya laughed and asked if she could keep one of my fancy pencils. "Of course," I said. "They're lucky." After they left, I sat at that same table and realized something strange. Revenge hadn't felt like revenge at all. It felt like maintenance, like finally changing the air filter after years of pretending the dust didn't bother you. When Priya called to confirm the court had accepted our filings, I thanked her. "You've been calm through all this," she said. "Most men your age lose it." "Calm's cheaper than chaos," I replied, "and I've already paid enough." That night, I made coffee instead of whiskey. The house was too quiet, but, for once, quiet didn't mean lonely. It meant everything that needed saying was already written down and signed. December arrived with the kind of light that forgives nothing. Cold mornings, thin sunlight, and snow that fell like static. Soft, relentless and indifferent. The storm outside didn't bother me. I'd already lived through one inside. I woke every day at 6, brewed my coffee black, and watched it steam against the frost-coated window. Same mug, same table, but not the same man. There's a strange peace in knowing the truth can't hurt you anymore. It already cashed its check. I kept the binder on the second shelf of my office, spine out, labeled in small letters, "The Fall." I didn't need to open it. Its weight was enough. Every time I walked by, it reminded me that dignity, once reclaimed, has mass. Some mornings I'd open my old file cabinet, rows of folders from my working years, HVAC invoices, maintenance logs, pension statements, real tangible proof of a life, built one repair at a time. People think revenge is fire, but it's really filing cabinets. You put everything where it belongs. Friends started to hear fragments of the story through the small-town grapevine. One afternoon, a neighbor, Jim, from across the street, stopped by with a six-pack. "Heard things got rough," he said quietly. "You doing all right?" "I'm organized," I said. It was the truest answer I had. Linda moved into a small apartment near Route 59. She emailed twice, brief, formal, asking about mail forwarding and the possibility of reconciliation after the dust settles. Priya advised me to respond only, once short and factual. My reply was 5 words: "The dust is the point." Ethan didn't last long at his firm. Word spread about the conflict of interest. Corporate America doesn't like messes it didn't make. By mid-December, his name was quietly removed from the company directory. Nora told me he'd tried to spin a story about a misunderstanding, but documents don't misunderstand. They define. Nora herself was steady, even brave. She'd found her own lawyer, opened a new savings account, and started writing down every financial change. In a notebook I gave her. Paper never lies, I told her. It waits. On December 20th, Priya called to review final settlement terms. Equitable division, no access to my pension beyond statutory limits, consent orders protecting the house and HELOC. It's a clean outcome, she said. Clean is all I wanted, I replied. After the call, I stood at the window and watched two cardinals fighting over seed on the frozen railing. One male, one female, both too stubborn to give up the spot. It made me smile. Nature doesn't apologize for competition. That evening, I wrote a letter to Nora like I did every Sunday. I never mailed them. I kept them in a wooden box labeled, "For when she needs strength." That night's letter said, "You can't always choose the moment you lose your illusion, but you can decide what kind of person steps out of it. Let the truth hurt once, then let it guide you forever." People asked if I hated Linda. I told them, hate takes up space that peace could use. Hate is sloppy, boundaries are neat. On Christmas morning I brewed coffee and lit no candles. The house smelled like nothing, and it was perfect. No cinnamon to mask guilt, no lilies to cover decay, just air that belonged to me. Before bed, I opened my voice recorder, the same one that began this entire process. December 25th, I said. Justice settled, proof preserved, life quiet. I paused, then added, I didn't lose her. She lost someone who never stopped being decent. Then I turned off the light and let the quiet have the last word. January arrived with a cold so clean it erased sound, the kind of air that burns your lungs and blesses you for surviving it. Snow stacked against the porch rails like pages I hadn't written yet. Everything looked the same, but nothing was. Ethan moved out of the house in early January. Nora told me through short texts. No emotion, just logistics. He took the couch, the TV, some clothes. She'd already opened a new checking account in her own name and set up automatic deposits. I helped her build a spreadsheet to track every expense, with green cells for cleared bills. Budgeting, I said, is a kind of revenge. Numbers don't lie, and they never shout. She laughed through tears. Linda's attorney sent over the first mediation schedule for January 14th. The letter was long, full of careful adjectives: regret, reconciliation, emotional distress. Priya skimmed it once, looked up and said, "They're trying sympathy. We'll answer with evidence." At the mediation, Linda avoided my eyes. She wore the same perfume she'd worn that day in Ethan's den. Floral, heavy, expensive guilt in a bottle. The mediator introduced herself, soft voice, folded hands. Priya opened the binder, its spine cracking like a promise kept. She didn't even raise her voice. "Our position," she said, "is organized." Linda's lawyer started a speech about emotional misunderstanding during menopause. Priya waited until he was done, then laid out each exhibit like she was dealing. Cards, HOA, still, phone records, transaction logs, the HELOC letter. "These are dates," she said calmly. "And dates don't negotiate." The mediator nodded, quiet. "I think we can agree Mr. Hale deserves asset protection," she said finally. I didn't speak much. I didn't need to. The silence did the work. After 2 hours, we reached a settlement. She'd keep her pension and car. I'd keep the house, my accounts, and full control of the equity I'd built over 35 years. Spousal support capped at the statutory minimum. Priya looked at me, and I just nodded. Outside, the sky was white with cold. I breathed in the air and exhaled 20 years of misplaced trust. A week later, I drove to the Goodwill off Ogden Avenue, with a box in the passenger seat. Inside, a few of Linda's scarves, including the pumpkin one. I parked, carried it in, and dropped it gently on the counter. The clerk asked if I wanted a receipt. Yes, I said. I keep track of everything. When I got home, I clipped the goodwill slip behind the florist receipt, the lilies she bought to mask guilt. That page, I decided, was the last in the story. That evening, I cleaned the house top to bottom, not out of anger but ceremony. I replaced the cinnamon candle with an unscented one, wiped every counter, washed the last of her perfume out of. The sheets, the silence that followed, wasn't emptiness, it was reclamation. Nora and Maya came over the next weekend. We made pancakes, laughed, and talked about little things, school projects, a leaky faucet, a movie we'd half-watched together years ago. At one point, Nora said quietly, "You seem lighter." "I changed the locks," I said, smiling, "on the doors and in my head." That night, I sat by the window, a cup of coffee cooling beside me, the house finally smelling like nothing but itself. The world outside looked brutally honest. Snow, streetlight, silence. I liked it that way. Some men get even. I got free. February came quiet and pale, the kind of winter that looks like an empty page. Naperville was half asleep under a blanket of frost. The same HOA that once guarded secrets now bragged about transparency. An irony so sharp I could have cut glass with. They held a small neighborhood meeting that month to celebrate improved security systems. Folding chairs, paper cups of cocoa, and the smell of optimism. I stood in the back, hands in my jacket pockets, while Ginny from the HOA read out the agenda. "We want to thank residents who believe in proper requests," she said, glancing my way. The crowd clapped politely. I nodded once. Proper. The word fit like a lock clicking shut. Ethan wasn't there. Neither was Linda. He'd moved into a short-term rental off Aurora Avenue. Word was, he couldn't find steady work since leaving his firm. His resume, it turns out, looked smaller under a microscope. Linda kept posting filtered photos of sunsets with captions about fresh starts. No faces, no names, just orange skies and silence. I didn't comment. Truth doesn't chase applause. Life had quieted into its own rhythm. Coffee at 6, mail at 10, a walk past the frozen river by noon. The house finally sounded like it belonged. To one person again. Every creak, every hum of the furnace was mine. One night, Nora invited me over for dinner. Just her, Maya, and me. 3 plates, no speeches. The kitchen smelled like chicken soup and clean air. After we ate, Maya asked, "Grandpa, why are those turkey cards in your desk drawer?" I smiled. "We're saving them for a better table." She grinned, like she understood, and maybe she did. Kids have a way of sensing truth even when adults name it something else. Later, after they went to bed, Nora stood by the sink, drying her hands. "Do you ever miss her?" she asked quietly. "Miss who she was, maybe," I said, "but that version of her died in Ethan's den." Nora nodded. "I keep thinking about that night. How calm you were." "Calm isn't weakness," I said. "It's preparation. Rage burns fast. Proof lasts forever." When I drove home, the streets were slick with melting snow, streetlights stretching long shadows over the road. I thought about all the things I'd carried, receipts, letters, photos, and how somewhere between collecting and confronting, I'd stopped feeling broken. I hadn't just survived the betrayal, I'd archived it, catalogued it, made it too organized to ever haunt me again. I keep one relic of that entire chapter, the gas station receipt from October 18th, circled total, 462. It sits in a small glass frame on my nightstand. A souvenir from the day everything ended and began at the same time. That circle isn't just ink, it's a border, the size of a life you reclaim when you stop shouting and start documenting. People tell me revenge feels sweet. They're wrong. Sweet things fade. Justice tastes like clean water after a long walk, plain, clear, earned. Sometimes I pass Ethan's street on my morning walks. His blinds are always closed now. Sometimes Linda's car is parked there, engine idling, but she never goes in. They exist like two ghosts who built their own haunting. As for me, I plant new things, winter pansies along the walk, seeds that bloom in frost because they don't care who's watching. The house smells like soap and coffee now, nothing else. When people ask what I lost, I tell them the truth. You didn't lose me, you gave me away. And every time I lock the door behind me, the key turns smoother than it ever did before. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you're listening at night, set your thermostat the way you like it. No one else gets a vote.